video series where we'll be taking an in-depth look at the programming of an elite level footballer. Hopefully we'll follow a full year of strength and conditioning training from my friend Dan, who is currently playing for Avondale FC and NPL Victoria, which serves as the second tier of professional football in Australia. I really wanted to make this video series to show what real training can look like at the elite level. Dan has in excess of 5 years of strength and conditioning training under his belt, so he possesses really good levels of speed, power, strength, and fitness. Some of the training methods we use throughout the year will therefore be more advanced. But at this stage of the year, we're in the early off-season, so the emphasis is on general prep techniques and rebuilding some foundational strength and capacity that Dan might have lost during the competition period. As we move through the off-season, into the pre-season, and eventually into the in-season, the goal will be to shift from general training techniques to more specific training techniques and hopefully use what we've built in the off-season to develop more sport-specific traits like speed and power. So after a couple of weeks of complete rest and recovery, as usual, Dan was raring to go and ready to start training again for next year. Before we got stuck into the first off-season training block, I programmed a test week to gauge exactly where we are now and to be able to track our progress throughout the year. Before we take a look at some of the testing protocols and Dan's results, we'll just take a look at the first week of programming. Whilst it is important to collect testing data pre and post training cycles, we also don't want to lose a whole week of training for just testing. So a method that I prefer to use is to build that first week of testing into the first week of training. So looking at the strength-based testing first, again, this week will serve as an introduction to the program that will follow. So all of the movements that Dan sees here are the ones that you'll see in his first phase of training, but just at a reduced volume here. So for the testing, on day 1, we perform 3 rep max tests in the barbell front squat and the chin up, and on day 2, the trap bar deadlift and the barbell bench press. No testing on day 3, but again, this just serves as an introduction to the first phase that will follow. So with those 4 tests, we've assessed strength in a lower body squat, a lower body hinge, an upper body pull, and an upper body push. For all 4 of those tests, I instructed Dan to perform warm-up sets, 1 of 10, 1 of 5, 1 of 3, and then a 3 rep max attempt. These 4 tests give me a well-rounded view of Dan's strength levels and allow me to program suitable volumes and intensities throughout the off-season period. I choose to use 3 rep max tests because from this I can easily predict a 1 rep max value, and the risk of performing a heavy 1 rep max really outweighs the reward of getting a slightly more accurate number. Moving on to the conditioning-based testing, again, Dan will have 3 conditioning-based training sessions per week, and we use this testing week to introduce some of the things that he's going to be doing during that phase. So all of the warm-up and prep work that Dan does before he does his testing this week is the same warm-up and prep work that he'll be doing before his conditioning training sessions in the first phase. So on day 1, we assessed anaerobic capacity using a repeat sprint ability test. On day 2, we assessed aerobic capacity using a 6-minute mass test. And on day 3, we assessed sprint speed using a 40-meter sprint test. Again, these 3 tests give me a well-rounded view of Dan's fitness levels and allow me to program effectively for the off-season period. So let's take a look at Dan performing some of the tests and see how he did. This is Dan's 3RM front squat effort. He achieved 100 kilos or 220 pounds for 3 reps, which gives him a training max of 105 kilos or 231 pounds. Really solid lift here and a really good start to his testing week. Next is the 3 rep max chin up. You can add external load to chin ups in a number of ways. Here you can see Dan using the dumbbell between the feet technique, and he achieved an additional load of 35 kilos for 3 reps. Next is the 3 rep max trap bar deadlift effort. Dan achieved 150 kilos or 330 pounds for 3 reps, which gives him a training max of 160 kilos or 352 pounds. Again, another really solid lift here and probably a little bit more left in the tank as well. Finally, this is the 3 rep max bench press, 97.5 kilos or 215 pounds for 3 reps, which gives him a training max of 105 kilos or 231 pounds. Moving on to the field-based tests, on day 1, we perform the repeat sprint ability test, which is assessing our ability to repeat anaerobic efforts with minimal rest. We use the width of the 18-yard box, which is 40 meters in length, with 30 seconds rest between each sprint. Down here are Dan's times, rep 1, 5.18, and so on. To calculate your score for this test, you can add up all your times to give yourself a repeat sprint ability total time, which for Dan was 32.59, and then also take the average of the first 3 and the average of the last 3, divide them by each other, which gives you an RSA decrement score, which for Dan was 97.5%, which means there was just a 2.5% drop off between his last 3 and his first 3, which is a really good score. On day 2, we performed the 6-minute mass test. This is a really easy test to perform using a track or any open space. You run as hard as you can, but consistently for 6 minutes. You record your distance and you divide it by your time in seconds. So Dan covered 1,810 meters in 360 seconds, which gives him a mass score of 5.03. A max aerobic speed score of 5.03 is an elite level score. Really, really good. On day 3, we performed the 40-meter sprint test. Really simple. Again, we used the width of the 18-yard box and performed 2 rests with maximum recovery between each one, and we took Dan's lowest time of 5.17. At the top of the page here, we've summarized all of these results for Dan to see, and we'll use these scores to program his conditioning through the off-season period. So that was a really successful week for Dan. He was able to get a jump on off-season training and achieve some really good test scores as well. In our next video, we'll dive into the programming behind phase 1 of his training and take a look at some videos of Dan performing that training in the gym and on the field.